Hello, I'm Org, and in this video I will review the Spitfire Mark I, a superb Tier 5 fighter in the British line. In this video I won't say much about the history of this aircraft, simply because the Spitfire is such a famous aircraft, I assume everybody already knows about it. So instead this video will just have a brief overview of the main points. The Spitfire design lineage was begun in 1934 with the Type 224, which was designed to meet an RAF specification for a high-speed interceptor armed with 4 machine guns. This aircraft isn't one of the Warplanes, it's down at Tier 3. However, the design went nowhere. The contract was instead won by the Gloucester Gladiator, Britain's last biplane fighter. Billy Mitchell, the lead designer at Supermarine, was very disappointed by this failure and set about trying to improve the design. These improvements included an enclosed cockpit, retractable undercarriage, a thinner and shorter wing, and a more powerful engine. The RAF gave Supermarine some money to pursue the design, and in early 1936 the prototype Spitfire flew. After some minor changes, the Spitfire was ordered. However, production was delayed because Supermarine was busy building flying boats, while their parent company Vickers was building Wellington bombers. In fact, the RAF contemplated ending the Spitfire production early to build more Beaufighters. Eventually, Spitfires did start rolling off the production lines and they entered service in late 1938. At the start of the war, the Spitfires were based in Britain and so only encountered unescorted bombers until the Germans had started advancing to the Channel coast in 1940. The Spitfire did alright in these early engagements, but the tactics and training of the RAF had focused on shooting down unescorted bombers. Essentially, they tried to maximise firepower to the front. By contrast, the German tactics were more focused on flexibility, which often gave the 109 an advantage in the early engagements and in the Battle of Britain. In this battle, the Spitfires made up around a third of the RAF fighter strength, and were usually sent in to engage the 109s, while the slower Hurricanes were sent after the bombers. The Spitfire did very well in this role since it was fast, although not as fast as the 109, and it was very manoeuvrable, easily able to outroll and outturn the 109. The main drawback of the Spitfire design was that the machine gun armament did not have sufficient armour-piercing ability to consistently land critical hits on the Germans, particularly the German bombers. Because of this, some aircraft were fitted with two 20mm cannons in place of 4 machine guns. The Spitfire Mark I was retired in 1941 as the Mark II variant entered service in large numbers. However, the Mark II was soon also replaced by the Mark V Spitfire, as a result of Focke-Wulf fighters arriving in France and basically outclassing this aircraft. A lot of this history is reflected in World Warplanes. The Spitfire is generally middle of the road in all performance parameters. I tend to fly it as a turn fighter, but it can also perform very well as an energy fighter. The Spitfire is above average for its tier in terms of both max speed and dive speed. The 109V, the P40 and the MiG-3 are the only Tier 5 fighters that can outrun it in level of flight, while the 109E, the 109V and the P40 are the only aircraft that can outdive the Spitfire. The rate of climb of the Spitfire is also above average, only the Yak and Lag fighters are superior. This, combined with the Spitfire's optimum altitude of 1400 metres, means that the Spitfire can climb up to 1800 to 2400 metres at the start of a match, and probably find itself above some easy prey to knock out of the game, or at the same altitude to engage the heavy fighters in a fair fight. These are the reasons that Spitfire makes a good energy fighter. Should using speed and climb not be your style, or simply not working for you, then you can fall back on the Spitfire's manoeuvrability. With a turn time of 14.8 seconds, the Spitfire is only outclassed by the Yak 1 and the Zero, with the Yak 7 having a very slight edge over the Spitfire. The rate of roll of this aircraft is a bit subpar though, so try not to engage people in scissors. Because the Spitfire is a medium altitude fighter, you can use this to your advantage. You can use your turn and rate of climb to slowly drag the Yaks and Zeros nearer to 2000 metres, where you'll begin to compete with them in terms of rate of climb, or conversely you could drag the MiGs down to around 2500 metres, where you can outturn them at very high altitudes. The MiGs can outturn you. There is one more advantage of the Spitfire in a turn fight, and that is its dive speed. If you're on the tail of a fighter, then they're going to have a really hard time diving away from you, which gives you a long time firing at fleeing enemy aircraft. The final thing to discuss with regards to the Spitfire is the guns. The Mark I has two choices of guns, either 8 .303 caliber machine guns or 4 .303s and 2 20mm cannons. Both loadouts are good, and they each have their own strengths and weaknesses. The full machine gun loadout is the one I flew most of my battles in. In this configuration you have very good firepower at short ranges, and your aircraft is also slightly more manoeuvrable. However, beyond 400 metres or so you cannot do any damage to enemies. Flying out with 4 machine guns and 2 cannons increases your overall firepower and gives you some ability out to 700 metres range. However, the big disadvantage of flying the setup was that the cannons overheat rapidly and cool down slowly. I think that in practice the all machine gun setup might actually have better firepower, since those guns heat up much less rapidly so you get more use out of them. However, there were a few games, particularly in 1v1s, where I would have really enjoyed the extra range of the 20mm cannons. I think the decision of what gun setup to go with could also be determined by your playstyle. I tended to fly this aircraft as a turn fighter, so I was usually close to enemy aircraft, and the extra manoeuvrability of the all-machine gun setup was nice. However, if you tend to fly this fighter more like an energy fighter, doing comparatively short bursts and then pulling away would give your guns a chance to cool down, and you would really appreciate the extra hitting power of the 20mm guns. I flew 115 battles in the Mark I Spitfire, shooting down 148 enemy aircraft and getting 41 assists, for an adjusted kills per game of 1.47. I won 59% of my matches in this fighter, which I suppose is the main thing in the end. As I said earlier, I tended to fly the Spitfire as a turn fighter. Before the initial engagement I would climb as high as I could. Generally, I would not worry too much about being in the first or second row. Turn fighters generally do better getting into an already established fight, but the Spitfire has enough speed, hit points and turn time to survive for a long time under enemy fire. Once the enemy was spotted, I would generally make a call about either engaging people at my altitude or diving on those lower down. As a general rule, if I spotted an enemy was targeting me, I would use a split S to engage the lower altitude fighter and drag my engager down with me. You will have too much speed to stick on the lower altitude fighter immediately, but after a yo-yo or two you can generally settle into a typical turn fighter style of play. If no one was targeting me, I would support my teammates in dealing with high altitude fighters first. I would usually stick on their tail for as long as I can, then break off and find another target. At these altitudes you can still turn aside people, but you don't have a lot of energy gain, so you will struggle to keep up with those fighters. The mid-game is where the Spitfire excels. It flies like a pretty typical turn fighter. You can stick on most people's tail, steadily wearing down their hit points. Well, I say steadily, you can actually wear down their hit points really quickly. And then you just break off when you see bullets coming towards you. The mid-game is all about doing as much damage as you can while conserving your own hit points. As I said earlier, try to drag the zeros and yaks up, and basically everything else can either be dragged down or it just doesn't matter what altitude you're flying at. In the endgame, I think the Spitfire is a bit weak. You don't really have the firepower to destroy things in a single pass, so you will rely on either sticking on your opponent's tails or making multiple passes. If your opponent has an altitude advantage, either of these things will be difficult. I did find some success by disengaging and climbing again. People often won't climb in the endgame and you can get above them relatively easily. But more often than not, I won because essentially my damage output in the mid-game gave me a lot of allies in the endgame. Anyway, that's how I flew the Spitfire Mark I. I hope you found this review informative or helpful. And now we'll get on to talking about the gameplay. So you've already seen me get my first kill, and there's my second kill, a Tier 6 Mustang fighter, which luckily enough I was able to stick on its tail as it kind of started stalling a bit there. Now turning around to get on its tail of the second P-51. Now this aircraft is way faster than me, it can way outdive me, or has a vastly superior dive speed I should say. But luckily for me, it keeps turning, but instead of following after it, I'm actually staying up at decent altitude, so it has to climb back up to me when it's at low speed, and I can stick on its tail, but I just can't quite get my guns to bear at the moment. So a quick burst there, but in all the frame rate stutter, you can't really see much. And here's what I was talking about. I've got my 2 kills, and well, in part because of that, it's now a 6-on-1 dogfight, so it kind of doesn't matter that I kind of suck at the end game. I should also say that for some reason, basically all of my Spitfire Mark I replays I'd been saving up just wouldn't work. So this one and the next game you'll see are actually both really old, and for some reason I could only get them going at about 13 to 20 frames per second, so there's a bit of frame stutter at times, but it seems we're just going to have to live with it. So anyway, last enemy aircraft, an IL-2T. I've still got full hit points, which means I could actually probably just sit on this guy's tail and win. But, good chance it's got bombs. It's not going to use them if it's flying upside down like that. But still, actually I should have had a look then, but it's probably got bombs. Or possibly got bombs. Just assume they do, unless you know they don't. So I'll stick up a bit high and just try and do my damage from up here. And well, I managed to get my third kill. Nice and easy. And here we are on National Park. The final replay that I'm showing you in this video. By which I mean it's one of the only two that I actually managed to get to work. Plus the battle against the bots. You see in this one I'm going out with the cannon armaments. You'll be able to see it. Well, the last one also had cannons, but you'll be able to see it compared to the machine gun setup I had in the first match. You see it's an early game because I only had 2 kill markings. I think I actually only got up to 3 in this one, whereas I'm starting to get up to 4 in most aircraft I fly, but I didn't actually fly this one all that much, only 100 odd games. Anyway, we've spotted the enemy, and it is to my right, and I think it was above me. Which is a bit unfortunate, but I'm still just flying into the centre to meet up with my team. I don't need to start that fight if I don't have to. And we've spotted 2 ground attack aircraft down low, so that's not a priority at the moment. Definitely not worth losing all this altitude over. So I bet there's going to be other fighters escorting them though. Yep, there's something down there. P-36. Still a lot of altitude to lose, so I'd prefer not to. Yak 1's a decent target to get out because it can turn inside me. So I should get them out of the game quickly. So Bristol 146 flying directly under me, which I could roll onto really easily, but I decided to go for the Yak 1 and then change my mind again. Bristol 146 because I can get out of the game nice and quick. Even though it's not really a threat to me, but didn't choose to follow it in the roll, chose to keep my speed up and go for the Yak 1 now. As you can tell, I'm a bit indecisive. Put some big hits into the Yak 1. And well, it looks like it's targeted me as well, so we're going to do a series of head-on passes here. But I'm pretty sure I have more hit points than the Yak 1, and I've definitely got more firepower than it. So I should win this head-oning. Yep. But of course I took engine damage because going head-on results in engine damage. But of course I've got a pneumatic restarter, so I can fix that easily enough. Come back around onto the 146, or at least I'm trying to. There's I-17, there's the 146. And a nice easy second kill for me. Let's see, an I-17, an IL-2, the I-7... Oh, that's an IL-2. Why did I say it was an I-17? I read it wrong. Anyway, I put some shots into the IL-2 while the BF-110 goes racing past me. And... well, I was going to go for the 110, but I see the lag 3, and the lag's actually probably a better target for me since, well, it's a tier 5 fighter, the same as I am. I just have to catch up to it first. But since that's not happening, well, the 110C it is. And well, it's doing a bit of a loop around me, which doesn't work to its advantage. Well, it's about to die, so I break off and put some shots into the IL-2, since it didn't look at the time like anyone was shooting at it, but now they are. Got an assist on the 110C. Get around, get a sneaky third kill on the IL-2. Now I'm going away from the lag 3, so it wouldn't notice me, even though it probably wouldn't have either ways. But now I'm basically on its tail, and this guy can't outrun or outturn me. So it's going to die. It's just a case of whether I get the kill or whether my team will take it from me. And well, you see my cannons are overheating, and I don't get killed, don't even get an assist, so I'm stuck with only 3 kills. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this review, and I'll see you all next time.